Data. What is data? Data is the truth. Data is true, then why does it seem to lie all the time? Well, data is kind of a broad term, so what even is it?
I like to think of data as a ball of clay. It still holds form and has shape, but like all objects untouched by humanity, it's at its purest form, and it doesn't really represent anything.
Data can become anything with the help of human deduction and reasoning. Just like data can be interpreted, so can art. I could create something inspiring just as I could create something offensive. But the clay remains neutral, and you see what I made as you interpret it. Just because it looks like a dog or it looks like a cat doesn't necessarily make it one. It's only representing the idea I have and you have about it. We make data a lie or a truth. After all, isn't everything that we recognize as something due to human interpretation?
It's not only the data. Data analysts have become lost trying to find the truth.
Kiev Liautru, in his article Data Isn't Truth, shows this sentiment that data doesn't necessarily need to show everything.
Unfortunately, data scientists themselves too often conflate their work with the search of the truth and fail to ask whether the data they are analyzing can actually answer the question they ask of it.
This is true. It's not uncommon for data scientists to only think concretely and not abstractly. Well, data doesn't really tell the truth all the time. Data can often be pretty misleading. Zach Starr goes into detail with this in his video, It's Easy to Lie with Statistics. He provides several examples, my favorite of which is when he explains that Berkeley only accepted 44% of male applicants while only accepting 35% of female applicants in the 70s. Now this may seem pretty damning at first, but when he dives further into the subject, it shows that the selection pool of men was much higher than women in some areas, rendering there to be more male acceptance but a larger percent of women being admitted at the same time, while it was the opposite in other categories. So does Berkeley hate women or men? Trick question. Berkeley only likes you if you have your dad's credit card. 2013, Palm Beach Gardens, Florida. The creative kid, Evan Chambers, is fascinated by this. Now, what is this? Well, this is a game that I used to really like called Akinator. And it's basically trying to guess something that you have in your head. And to my impressionable young mind, this seemed like magic. It was amazing to me to think that this machine could know what I'm thinking just from asking me a couple questions. Interesting thing is that this game scared me. I always got the feeling that I was being watched every single time I got it right. It was a morbid curiosity when I went to go and play the game again to make this video, and it got it right. If you're wondering what I was thinking about Fat Thor. But why does this tangent matter?
Because I believe it to be a good example of confirmation bias. Let's go back for a bit, and I mean really far back. Primally, we are all hardwired in a similar way. So this is why it can be pretty easy to fool us if you know how to phrase things in the right way. This is due to confirmation bias. If you are predisposed to believe something, or you have conditioning to see something as it is, then you'll be more likely to overlook data that doesn't fit your worldview. If I hadn't believed it, I wouldn't have seen it. This is why there's so much disinformation in media, because groups of people believe something even when the data is so stacked up against them. Which is why 10-year-old me forgot all the times Akinator was wrong, because he knew I was thinking about Fat Thor.
It would be kind of hard to ignore the elephant in the room. I thought I told you to stay outside. Yeah, I did. COVID has grasped our lives and our attention for over a year, so it only makes sense to have this as an example of data. The common expression comes up, the numbers don't lie. Then why do some people think that they do? Well, the numbers don't lie. People lie and manipulate all of the time. Delivery is everything. So if you see some data like this, it might make you feel differently from data like this. Presentation of data is everything. The numbers here are both true, but the way that they are represented changes a lot about the way I feel about it. The first one has a more interesting graphical representation, while the other graph is purely displaying facts, like data. Doesn't really make me feel good. So what does this mean? Who cares about how it looks or feels?
But it does matter. While data is relatively harmless, data, like all powerful things, can be very easily misused at the expense of others. An example of this is the interview of Trump last year explaining how inflated the death numbers in the US are. The White House uses death ratio in proportion of cases instead of a proportion of population. This caused many people to become confused as a result, and this slight manipulation caused a lot of people to distrust the population death proportion, thinking both graphs were representing the same data. Thus, many people started taking sides, leading to mass politicalization of COVID-19.
This is a great example of selection bias. Changing what the data represents to fit your idea of what it should is exactly the type of misinformation polarizing America. Cherry-picking data and choosing what we want to believe and what not to is selection bias. But how is misinformation spreading? If I were to show you a sheet of numbers, just like a sculpture, it's your interpretation that would make it happy or sinister. But just as the artist can manipulate how and what you see, so can the analyst. Okay, but what does this got to do with me? Well, data has everything to do with me. I'm kinda data. Well, not really, but my data is being gathered all the time. What is this even supposed to mean? Why are you asking me all these questions? But you know who you can't trust with your data? According to Simplilearn, our data is being collected by big tech companies every minute. Well, precisely this much. That's a lot of data. Like, more than my small monkey garbage brain can understand. Why is this important? You're no longer anonymous online. Thanks to some leaks from a certain someone, we know now that what happens on the internet stays on the internet. And it stays in a government facility underground, located in... Yeah, so all those YouTube videos you watched titled, "How to Make Friends" and "Why Am I So Lonely All the Time?" Yeah, Obama knows about it. Right now, our data is being sold to advertisers. Every single time we click that terms of service notification, we sell a little bit of our privacy to corporations, allowing them to personalize everything around us. So maybe the reason why there's so many hot singles in your area is because of your desperation on Snapchat and Tinder DMs. The algorithm knows what just to give to you. Yet while we give up all this data, we aren't even allowed to access it. As Kate Crawford points out, not only are we rarely granted the access to our own data, we lack the capability to analyze it and make sense of it, particularly in the context of other users. I really like this quote because it's so true. I hadn't ever thought about it, but if my data is going to be out there, I'd at least want to know what it is. Now you might be thinking, well, this is great. I get the advertisements that I want to see, more products specifically chosen to meet my needs. Well, yeah, it's nice to have ads that are tailored to your preferences, but this also leads to an increase of surveillance, and that leads to less privacy. And less privacy tends to lead to more control, and more government control leads to... So, let's talk about this thing. It's weird and scary, and I don't know how to explain it other than to provide an example. Of course I'm going to talk about China. What do you think? I'm not going to go for the low-hanging fruits? The low-hanging fruits? Well, you're wrong. China's a pretty unique country. For most of modern history, they weren't really considered an economic superpower, comparable to the likes of America. So how are they now the boogeyman that God-loving conservatives think about more than their third wife? Well, it's pretty simple. I'm just kidding. It's really complicated. But in a word, communism. And by communism, I mean capitalism. It's really just an excuse for a centralized government focused completely on maximum efficiency. If you want to mass produce something for cheap in a worker-friendly environment, you get it from China. So as a relatable totalitarian dictator, how am I supposed to keep my people in line? Well, that's easy. Total and constant surveillance. We talked about the social credit system in class, but it's really a prime example of the misuse of data. Keeping tabs on your citizens and using negative incentives is enough to destroy freedom of speech. Data is now being used to control. It is now a limiting factor for a lot of people, and it is ruining lives. Like, over things that don't really matter. If I were to pop some Wii Sports Resort and do some hardcore gaming, It would legitimately have consequences. That's right, Reddit. Gamers are now an oppressed minority. Kevin Hong, with his catchy title, Big Data Meets Big Brother as China Moves to Rated Citizens, says, imagine a world where many of your daily activities were constantly monitored and evaluated. What you buy at the shops and online, where you are at any given time, with who your friends are and how you interact with them, how many hours you spend watching content or playing video games, and what bills and taxes do you pay or not. This idea of constantly being monitored isn't that crazy or sci-fi to us. We're kind of accustomed to being monitored. That's why this product exists. But in all seriousness, it's a scary thought as someone who's luckily lived all of their life not having to worry about saying something that'll piss off the government. It's scary to start seeing that change, even in my own home. Things I do online now have real-world consequences. Unlike 10-year-old Evan, calling my friends ass faces while doing 540 twists and Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, life's just different now. Data at its core is nothing. Just something we made up, and it's only representative. It cannot take a stance or form without us, so if data can be anything, where does that leave us? Does that mean we live in a world of nothing? Humanity is a weapon. We take ideas, objects, people, and turn them into objects of pure destruction. Every human idea can be used as a weapon, and we do weaponize everything. Data was doomed to kill from the start. Kill from the start. Kill from the start. Kill.